The figures today seem to be calling into question whether or not the labor market is actually steadying. Our own analysts at Bloomberg Economics write that the decline was partly due to a combination of temporary disruptions. I'm wondering if you can take us through this and what you're gleaning from the data we got today.
Yeah, so this morning, the Labor Department reported that jobs were down about $100,000 jobs last month. That cut was primarily driven by a temporary work stoppage of some doctors and physicians, a couple of healthcare strikes going on last month. The issue with that is that over the last year, the only sector driving the vast majority of job growth has been the healthcare one. And so the precarity of that was really shown over the past month, that a temporary strike of really not that many workers in the grand scheme of things was able to tip our labor market into the negative. We saw declines in transportation and warehousing and manufacturing and construction. Across the board, things are really clearing up, that the picture in the labor market is not good.
So what was the weather? We're actually hearing that was part of the blame, was the weather, and
yes.
I'm obviously being sort of cute here. So take the weather, and we had Snowcrete, and everybody was locked in their house for a couple of weeks. Remove the storm, remove the strikes. What would this number have looked like?
I think what we have seen is really a stagnating labor market.
Yeah.
But I will note that the Labor Department revised down the December number considerably, such that went into the negative. The January revision wasn't as extreme, but I think if you look at the kind of 3-month, 6-month picture, that's a little less noisy. We are seeing at best stagnation, and at worst a tip into the red that is here to stay.
Wow.
So we did hear from the administration on these numbers earlier today. The NEC director, Kevin Hassett, joined Bloomberg Television and Radio with Jonathan Farrow earlier, and he said at this point the administration isn't concerned by the data. Let's take a listen and get your reaction on the other side.
On net, it's almost like a wash number. There's a new procedure, birth-death model at the BLS, which we believe is going to make the number more volatile. And so I think more and more we're going to have to average through the months. And remember, we had a really surprisingly positive number last month. And I think if you average the two, then it's about at the rate of job growth that's consistent with 3 or 4% GDP growth.
So is this more a math problem when you're hearing the NEC director there talking about maybe some of the broader context that we should be taking into account?
In my opinion, no. If you take the last 3 months of job growth and you average them, you get about 0. And so I'm not sure that's what you're looking for in a roaring economy, is job growth of 0. We also saw pretty concerning ticks down based on some population adjustments to labor force participation rate and to the employment population ratio that I'm keeping an eye on over the next few months to see if those are sustained. But, reports from this morning are that we wiped out about 4 years of gains in both of those, which from a, broader picture perspective is really not great. Wage growth is slowing. And as we know, looking at prices, we saw a big beat on PCE the week before last. And as the Fed heads into meetings here in the next couple of weeks, they are looking at rising prices, oil above 90 this morning, commodity pressures given the war on Iran, plus a real big bust this morning on jobs. It's not a great picture.
Well, that's what I wanted to add. So what the heck do you do if you're the Fed here? You look over the course of a year, 0 job growth. And what else is new today is $90 a barrel oil.
Yeah, it's not just oil. I mean, the number of commodities that come through the Strait of Hormuz, you've got fertilizer, which has already been affected over the last year by President Trump's tariffs. You've got rare earth minerals affecting clean energy and other imports. I just think the commodity picture is really likely to show more of what we saw in PCE.
How about $4 a gallon gas? We talked to Tom Closer earlier from Gulf. He made that prediction. I mean, that could be on our doorstep any minute, right?
I think what we saw out of CENTCOM yesterday is that they're expecting this war will not end until September at the earliest. Jet fuel is up massively. I mean, summer airfare is going to be a problem, and so will prices at the pump.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, we're not at $4 yet, but AAA this morning saying the national average is at about $3.32 a gallon. How does this impact the broader consumer spending picture when you have Americans paying more for their everyday essentials, or does a lot of that have to depend on the timeline, just how long they will be be willing to pay for those things that they need to get along in their lives.
We have seen over the past year, we're about a year out from Liberation Day, and those tariffs that have ticked on and ticked off, obviously with the Supreme Court IEEPA ruling the week before last, and then President Trump imposing Section 122 tariffs at 10 and now at 15%, according to Treasury Secretary Bessent. That pass-through takes about 6 to 9 months, just given what's on the shelves and when it hits. These other supply shocks driven by the war in Iran and these commodity prices, those will show up considerably faster. And now consumers are going to be really taking it from both sides, and they were already struggling to stay above board with what we were seeing with the tariff picture. So I'm really worried about pressures, especially on those lower and middle income consumers.
Are you, Liz, at Groundwork, are you factoring in, or is it even possible to quantify the impact of AI? Is there a chance that we look back at this last year and say, oh, wow, it's very obvious what happened? AI changed the job market permanently and brought efficiencies that we never could have forecast.
I think we're seeing some evidence of some productivity gains in some concentrated sectors, but across the board, we are not seeing that bear out. I've seen the estimates from Goldman and from Brookings and from others. I think what we are looking at at Groundwork is, are we seeing job quality declines? We are really not seeing differences in hours or in pay show up in the job market yet. We are seeing in some of those earlier career workers less hiring in those industries that drive young adult labor market outcomes. But so far, we're not seeing a ton in AI productivity gains. What I will say is that a lot of companies are using AI-enabled pricing techniques, which are actually allowing them to grow margins and grow productivity by way of increasing prices, and that, of course, will trickle down to consumers in unfortunate ways. So I'm not sure we've seen an entire redo of our economy yet, to be determined, I think. But from my perspective, we are not seeing evidence of that, and that is not driving what we're seeing in the picture of economic growth or the labor market.
In the final minute we have you, I wanted to go back to tariffs since you did mention it. And we hear the administration talk a lot about how tariff revenue is an offset to those tax cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And we didn't get to it today on the program, but there is this murmuring that we could see a reconciliation package 2.0. I'm wondering what you're gaming out here when it comes to the fiscal health and the balance sheet of the country, if we've seen the Supreme Court strike down those broad-based tariffs, but the administration is still using other authorities.
Yeah, that Section 122 authority can be in place for about 6 months, and so we'll see that play out here over the next 6 months. There are obviously other authorities. The administration has announced a number of Section 301 investigations, which just take time to play out, and you could see Congress kind of reassert their role in trade and tariff policy. I haven't seen appetite for that on Capitol Hill in my conversations on either side of the aisle. So I wouldn't hold our breath for that reconciliation package. But from the administrative authorities that the president has, he seems to have he's not holding back on using those. So I think it'll be mostly driven by those actions.
We only have about 30 seconds, Liz. Could we be in the second half of the year talking about the benefits of massive tax returns that the president has been predicting?
Not in my opinion, but I think really, I'm not sure if folks will have their tax returns by the end of the year, given the cuts to the IRS. They are really slowing down customer service and processing returns over there.